Thank you, Pat. I hope you can all hear me. Thanks, Laura. Lauren, I needed that. I appreciate the introduction. It sort of feels like it's somebody else you're introducing when I listen to it. I'm grateful to be here and grateful that the Mi'kmaq people have allowed us to live in this place in peace and to share the space we have. Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to Elder Ellen Hunt for opening up the space in a good way for us. It's always difficult to go after Lauren all the time. I don't know why I'm always after her. She does put something in my spirit with what she says and does. You folks can see my presentation. A thumbs up will help. I'll start sharing my screen. Not yet. Okay.
Now
okay, Francis, good.
You can see now, great. So when I was asked to speak, my head sort of went into so many different directions. There's quite a lot I'd love to say about housing, marginalized community, and energy poverty. But I sort of thought with 15 minutes, I'll just maybe be a little bit narcissistic, talk about myself, and then give you a sense of where I'm coming from. And then that will help you understand what inspires me to do what I do. And so I'll jump right into it. My focus today will be sort of threefold: what influences my perspectives, why energy poverty and the eradication of energy poverty is anti-racism work from my perspective, and then talk a little bit about who this is about, who this work is about. And so to give you a little bit more about who I am, I was born and raised in Kenya, in Kibera, which is sorry about that, which is one of Africa's largest urban slums. If you're curious about what that looks like, that's how a slum in Africa looks like, basically. And I'm not putting it there so that you can feel pity on me. I think I actually feel very privileged to have been born there, because that's in many ways contributed to who I am right now and how I look at things and what I do. Now, we faced a lot of housing issues. There was lack of services. We didn't have power. We didn't have sewer or running water. And what's interesting and probably linked to the energy poverty project and Energize Bridgewater project and what we're talking about today is my experience firsthand of the impact of well-meaning people had on our way of life. And it was both positive and in some cases not very positive. I was lucky enough, blessed by my creator, to have very strong parental guidance. I was blessed to have a good education, and somebody basically gave me a spark to thrive, and that's why I'm here. Had the privilege to successfully run for council in Mahone Bay, and I thank Mahone Bay residents that they, in a space, in many ways, to a certain extent, they had I will call it a referendum on race, and they passed with flying colors because they chose to elect me as their deputy mayor, and I'm privileged to be able to serve there. I have a great team of folks that I think we can do great things together. And so when it comes to, I'll share a little bit of, I guess, data, but I know that there'll be a researcher who will talk a little bit more about that. But I wanted to just put it out there. I mean, energy poverty, according to a study that was done when the energy poverty Energize Bridgewater project was starting, showed that energy poverty affects around 38% of households in Bridgewater. And we know that research has shown in Canada and North America, to put it broadly, that people of color face systematic disadvantages in energy costs and access to affordable housing. And in many ways, we know that housing and access to housing is very linked and interlinked with energy poverty. And then research also shows that comprehensive efforts, and highlight comprehensive, to address energy poverty, and not just energy bill assistance by providing long-term solutions and equitable solutions to energy poverty, are very critical steps in addressing the inequities that people of color face. So whenever we're doing any kind of work that is addressing poverty, housing, and in this particular case, energy poverty, in many ways we are doing, from my perspective, anti-racist work. Now that's talking about it broadly. We actually need to make sure that the work we do also has an anti-racist approach that is free of white supremacy, and there are better people who can talk about that than me, but it's critically important that we do not approach the work in a way that continues to perpetuate the inequities that continue to exist. Now, there's a quote that I picked out of the research, the energy poverty research that was done by the Energize Bridgewater project back in October 2018 and January 2019, where somebody said landlords actually won't rent to you if they see you're Black. And that's a reality that it's not just here in the South Shore, but almost all the large cities in North America face that issue. There's lots of research that shows people of color face challenges getting rentals. People of color have challenges owning homes, accessing funding to buy and purchase land and homes. So it's something that in many ways is very systematic. Now we also know, and I'm talking about this from mental health and addictions perspective, that 3 of the most significant determinants of mental health are freedom from discrimination and violence, social inclusion, and access to economic resources. And when you think about what we're talking about, the link between racism and violence and discrimination, and how that creates a feeling of being disconnected from a community, a lack of sense of belonging, and then coupled with the access or lack of access to economic resources, whereby people of color find it challenging to get loans, find it challenging to access mortgages, find it challenging to even be able to put food on the table because they don't have the jobs that they need. I mean, if you'd listen to Lauren just pointing out the fact that as a person of color having to work so hard just to make ends meet, that's been a reality of Black folks and people of color for a very long time. That's a reality that needs to change. It's not that people of color do not put in the energy and time, and it's not that they're lazy. It's just that they need to put a double effort to make ends meet. We know that, and from this research too, renters are more likely to experience energy poverty than homeowners. And when you think about renters, even in our small South Shore area, who are the likely renters? People who are of low economic status, and because of all the inequities that have been around, who are those likely to be? I would guess a huge proportion of them will be people of color. Those a social worker out in Halifax in late August with this COVID situation went out and started talking to people living outside. They're talking about their situations, and of the 35 people they were able to speak to, 31% were Indigenous. And we know that only the Indigenous population in Halifax is only 4%. So if you look at those stats, it just shows you how there's that, I guess, overrepresentation of Indigenous and racially visible people. And this also includes people of African descent, people who belong to LGBTQI community, who experience homelessness, who struggle with housing, who struggle with energy poverty and things like that. So there is a very strong correlation between energy poverty and income, and we need to address that. And as we do that, we seriously need to look at not just like Mayor David talked about, we need to look at not just the economic side of things, that the pennies and cents. We need to look at the whole person and how are we addressing that from that perspective. So I also wanted to talk about who this work is about, and I sort of took my role not to tell you who that is, but to just pose a few questions to you, so that as you think about the work and what you do, not just the Energize Bridgewater project, but what you do in your day-to-day, whether you're a stay-at-home parent, whether you work in recreation or you work in a municipality, you're a municipal leader. How can you make sure that these thoughts, these ideas come through in your work? Now, because I'm taking I guess, an anti-racist lens to this work, I know what I will say will not be very exhaustive, but there's a notion that people who've been marginalized for a very long time need to be counted in. Because of the decade of people of African descent, the provincial government came out with a report that is coined Count Us In, whereby basically the notion is that you cannot, there should be nothing for us without us. And from my perspective, this applies in everything we do and for everyone, not just people of color, but in general, when we think about things, generally it's not a very good idea to come up with solutions for people and start imposing those solutions on them. It's important that you count them in from the get-go. And I think that report, the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, there's so many things in there that we need to be doing that are tied to the work that we do. And for me, it's pretty critical that who or what gets counted counts, because we know if the stats don't show that people of color, indigenous folks, Black folks, the LGBTQ community, if those stats do not show that those people are facing disproportionate impacts from poverty and housing, they will not be addressed from that perspective. It will be a case of, oh, we're doing this for everyone, yet when you think about it critically, there are certain populations that are suffering more. And just a small example to put out there is that we've, for so many years, from a mental health and addictions perspective, we've talked about the success we've had with smoking and the impact of smoking in our population. The reality is, yes, we've come a very long way with policies and we've impacted smoking and reduced it so that we can reduce the harm. But interesting enough, in populations of people of color, smoking rates are still pretty high. Yeah, in the rates of over 40% or 30% in particular cases, whilst in the rest of the population it's less than 10%. And we can pat ourselves in the back and say, well, we've done a good job, but have we really, if our most marginalized are still being harmed by something that should not be harming them? And then the other piece is I'd like to talk about representation. And basically my take on this is that representation matters, but it's not enough. And when I say representation, I mean when we talk about wanting to address, to be anti-racist as communities, to be anti-racist as organizations, one of the key pieces to be able to move things forward is to make sure that the people who we want to include feel represented by the stuff they see, by the actions they see, by the people who are talking to them. So, for example, questions around, so how many people of color do we have in our municipalities, in our places of employment, in the Energize Bridgewater project? Are we really doing what we need to do to encourage people of color to come and work in these positions? Now, I know that there's been significant efforts within this project and even in the organization that I work in to put in policies and statements when you put out, I guess, advertisements for positions that say, well, we are inclusive, or we want to be inclusive of people of color, and we want you to self-identify. And that's great. It's a very good move. But the interesting piece around that is that does not necessarily attract somebody of color to be able to apply for a position when they know historically, one, that people of color do not live in that area or region. Why would they want to move there? When they know that historically they've gone for many different interviews, had the qualifications, but it's never succeeded for them to get a job, and a good job in that particular instance. So I think we need to move beyond just statements or lines in an advertisement and things like that, but meaningfully go out and seek for expertise from people of color. And then the prime example I would give is if the person the leader who got me into the health authority in the first place was not keen in expanding the diversity in the workforce, I would not be in the health authority. And it's not because I don't have the qualifications. I think the qualifications were there. It's just because of the processes that are in place, I would always get weeded out from many reasons. I can't pinpoint one, but I think it's the structures that are in place, the systems that have been put in place, unions and things like that, that make it very difficult for people of color to get access to these positions. And then the last piece for me is around meaningful involvement and to avoid tokenism as we engage people who this work is supposed to impact. I strongly believe that lived experience is expertise that needs to be valued and needs to be compensated. And so I'm encouraged by the fact that Energize Bridgewater as a project has chosen and is pushing boundaries around compensating people who have lived experience to come and provide input into the project. I will also push further and sort of say it needs to be more than just a honorarium, but actual compensation, so that people feel that their input and their in many ways that the expertise and experiences are valued. We really put a lot of emphasis on the initials before people's names. I have an MPH here, I have a PhD here. Those are great and they're valuable, but they're people who have skills and expertise that you can never learn in a classroom. And especially when it comes to lived experiences around poverty, marginalization, and the effects that can have on an individual and what people see as solutions to moving things forward. So I think it's important that we think differently about how we engage those folks. It's important that whatever we do, that people with lived experiences are involved and are meaningfully involved, and they become part of the solution, not just when we're doing research. And I think David said this a little bit differently. I always believe that if you want to go fast, yes, go alone. We can put out very beautiful documents about what we're doing. We can get very good data and research that tells us this and that. But if you want to go far, we need to go together. And when I say together, from my perspective, I think it means involving people who are impacted by the things we're trying to address. So thanks.